Okay, now when you're doing any type of electrical repair or electrical work, it is always good practice to disconnect the battery so something inadvertent doesn't happen. This is a 8mm or 5/16 bolt nut. So we remove the negative battery post, tuck it out of the way so it can't fall back and touch against the terminal and energize the truck. So right now your truck is dead and it's pretty easy to do. Here's the underhood fuse box. Open that up, and right here is the infamous fuse 27, which is your fuel pump fuse. And this is the one that seems to have a habit of melting down and causing problems. And then the relocation kit moves that circuit to position 70, which is unused. And I'll be doing that modification later on today when my parts come in. Okay, to be able to access the fuse box and separate it to get to the back side to make this repair on this relay socket, and then ultimately to do the fuse 27 to 70 conversion, you need to get enough free play and maneuvering room with this fuse box so you can separate it, take it apart. So to be able to get at that, you need to remove this top radiator cover, and I'm using a panel removal tool, but you can also use a flat blade screwdriver or something similar. Then a 10mm wrench to loosen this main power bus connector. That was tight. Set that to the side, remove the cables. Oh, it hit the floor, lucky. Move that outside. Spin the nut back on so you don't lose it. And now the tricky part, you have to separate the fuse box. So if you give a little pry on the cover will pop off. So that's out of your way. And this wiring harness is secured with another one of those push pins. So the fuse box is in two halves. It's held into the truck by these metal tabs, two in front and two in the rear. And you need to release those and carefully lever it off. And you can release those by moving that metal tab out of the way, or the plastic tab out of the way. I've got some little wood shims here I'm going to stick in there so I don't lose what I've gained. You can see it just moved up. Okay, so now the fuse box is loose from its mountings, so we can lift it up and off. And now we need to separate the two halves. And there are 4 clips on the front and 1, 2 on the rear and 1 on each end. So this is again where you need to be in like 6 places at once. And so you need to keep pressure on the halves while you pop these so they don't snap back down into place while you're doing it. There we go. All of them have been released. And now the wiring harness itself is attached with tape to either side to give you some more slack. You can carefully cut that tape, and it will allow the bottom to drop free, and remove the bottom section. And now you have access to the bottom of the fuse box and access to your wires. Now on to relocating fuse 27. This is what you get for about $34 from your local Napa store. The fuse relocation kit. You get a length of wire with the new terminal, a fuse, a couple pieces of shrink tubing, and a sticker to put in your owner's manual to remind you or the next person that the fuel pump fuse has been relocated. Also comes with a very detailed instruction booklet on how to take the fuse box apart and do this modification. This one is from Dorman. Here's the part number. So let's get started on doing this modification. All right, like I said, there's some very comprehensive instructions that come with the booklet, but what it really comes down to is they want you to snip the wire that is coming off of fuse 27. Turn this over, you can look in behind the fuse box and you can find it, and it is a large, maybe a 10 gauge blue with a red trace. And just to double check or double verify, I'm going to take that dental pick I had and slide it into the empty hole next to fuse 27, and yes, it is poking out next to 27. Here's 27, here's my probe, so I know that it is the wire attached to this fuse. You don't want to snip the wrong one. And they'd like you to clip this off as close as possible to the terminal in the fuse box, so there's nothing sticking out. Which I have just done. Well, I shouldn't say that they want you to. They like you to snip it off and then just cap the little stub with some shrink tubing. Well, if you can snip it off as tight up flush as possible, it can't touch anything. So that's what I just did. And we have our end sticking out, and fuse 70 is right here. And they give you quite a length of wire, which we really don't need. So I'm gonna nip some of that off. And then the supplied shrink tubing will fit over the terminal. So let's strip these two wires. Trim that off a little bit. Trim that off a little bit. And I'm going to do the same trick as I did before, taking the guts out of a butt connector. Slide that on. Give it a crimp. Move the tool. Slide that in, give it a crimp, get the soldering iron back out. solder in here to get some heat transfer going. And again, this is one step that you don't want to be impatient. You don't want to generate so much heat that you're melting the insulation, but you want your solder to flow in. See how I'm just pushing it in and it's flowing in towards the heat. So I know that it is hot enough to make a proper joint. Get the heat back on. Getting hot. Solder's going to flow towards the heat, so if it melts up here, which it's doing now, see how it's flowing in, it's going to suck in and flow down and complete the joint. Done. Let that cool. Still too hot. We'll have to let it cool for a few minutes and we'll be back. Okay, now that it is cool, we can get that shrink tube over it. Get it centered on our splice connection. Fire up the heat gun. Now, the shrink tubing that they supply with this kit has the goo, the adhesive goo in it. So that's a bonus. You don't want to burn it, but you want to heat it up enough to where it stops shrinking. And you're done. Let it cool. But it should just click in. We're going to go to this empty hole. We look at the wires on the bottom, and it appears that that connector goes in this orientation. Not that way, but this way. So we take the terminal, slide it in, and it clicks and locks into place. And we'll fold this extra out of the way. And tuck things back together a little bit. And now we're done. We've got our 2 terminals in location 70. We don't need number 27 anymore because there's nothing connected to it. So we'll just pull that. Now it's time to dress up and clean up the wiring harness a little bit and snap things together. I'm going to install the supplied 20 amp fuse for my new fuel pump circuit, and we will start to wrap up and clean up the wiring and get it back into place. And this is where saving these almost gone rolls of tape becomes very handy, because you can wrap and swing them around, whereas a big roll of tape would get in the way. lower tray, hopefully back in there. And make sure that all of the wires go inside of it. Make sure you don't have any stray wires hanging out. And start snapping the lower and upper halves of the fuse box together. On the sides, 2 in the back are done. We'll continue our wrapping. Get the harness back in that little trough that's provided. And fuse box kind of fell in on its own onto the metal mounting clips. It's done. These are clean, no corrosion. Get our 10mm wrench. Go gorilla on it, but it wants to be snug. Relays in place, new fuses in place. Good to go there. Put the cover back on, close the lid, and all that's left is to reconnect our battery. Okay, and we'll get this wiring harness back in its little holder. And our decorative trim cover. And then since I am here, use my battery post cleaner. Give the battery posts a quick cleanup job. And reattach our negative terminal. That should complete this repair. Success. Starts right up, so we obviously got the fuel pump thing done right. The repaired connector for the PCM relay. I'm assured of having good connection. So if on your 150 you get into that cranks no start condition, do the checks for either your fuse 27 or your converted fuse 70. Check your fuel pump relay, and in my case, I had a problem back here with the number 10, the PCM relay. So, and then don't forget to put the sticker in your owner's manual to remind you that the fuel pump fuse has been relocated. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time.